Okay, so last week it was announced that Tyson Fury will be fighting Derek Chisora for the third time in a trilogy fight on December 22nd at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. You know, the trilogy that we all wanted as boxing fans and fight fans alike. You know, it wasn't as if the first fights were one-sided. They were both very, very close fights. It wasn't as if Fury just jabbed Chisora's head off in the second fight and just stopped the fight. And it wasn't as if Fury outclassed him twice. But for some reason, Tyson decided, you know what, we need to see that another time, and so did Fury's team and everybody else. So here we are, the fight that nobody wanted. But I am curious about this one because it will be held. One, I'm interested the fact that this is actually a stadium fight and not an actual just general arena fight. I guess Tyson's at a point now in his career where he's probably too big for the MENs or the O2 arenas, and that which makes sense to me. I think if you look at his last few fights, he's obviously fought in Vegas the last few times and then fought Wembley in his last fight against Dylan White. So it makes sense to me why he's doing this. But one thing alright, it makes sense why he's fighting him in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is what I meant to say. But with Tyson Fury, his career is looked at in a very, in my opinion, in somewhat in the right way, but I think there's almost a false narrative that surrounds him. If you look at Tyson Fury's whole career, since he's come back, after he had obviously that long breakaway from boxing, and to me, first few fights, I didn't have any issue with them because obviously you need that's what you need. You take that many years of boxing, you take all the weight that he lost. He obviously can see wasn't the same, and no issue with that. To be honest with you, what I do have an issue with obviously is what he's done afterwards. But if we just go through though his opponents, so obviously Tyson Fury had, if I go through it, he obviously had the Safarian Pianeta fights, which were obviously his combat fights. Then he fought Deontay Wilder the first time around, which obviously resulted in a draw, which he won, but his stock was high. Then he then fought Tom Schwartz, Otto Wallin, and then fought Deontay Wilder twice, and then obviously fought Dylan White, and now he's fighting Derek Chisora. Now, in hindsight, this record isn't terrible in his last few fights because Dylan White's a good one. He was WBC #1 for like 100 years. Deontay Wilder, obviously WBC champion, one of the best in the division. Otto Wallin, not really great, but he's somewhat alright. And then you got Tom Schwartz, so who to me wasn't at all. You should be looking at much higher caliber of opponents there. But then if you actually go further down, so let's go pre-Klitschko. His few fights before that was Christian Hammer, Derek Chisora, Joey Abel, Steve Cunningham. And then you got the likes of Kevin Johnson and Vinny Madelon. So none of these guys really are of a certain level. But then I go a bit harsh with the Steve Cunningham is probably where Tyson stepped up a bit. And then you look at the ones after that, the likes of Chisora, Christian Hammer. Again, there's a certain caliber of opponent Tyson fights. He either fights the very, very best, or he fights people who do not have it. And if you look at Christian Hammer's record, for example, not since he fought Tyson, but if you look at Christian Hammer as an example of this, I'll pick him and I'll pick Chisora. We already know who Derek Chisora is, so I don't think it's worth really going into his record. We all know what he is as a fighter, and nothing more much to even to people who aren't British boxing fans. You know who he is. Christian Hammer's record is he has 27 wins, 17 KOs, with 10 losses and 5 KOs. Since he fought Tyson Fury, he beat Shaman Williams, Michael Sprott, Contemporary, beat David Price, TKO'd him. All due respect, I cannot pronounce this man's name. Zine Edim Benkalov, I think. Then he lost to Povetkin. And then he won his two after that. Lost to Luis Ortiz. Won again. Lost to Tony Yoka. Won again. Then lost his last two. His two after that to Hughie Fury and Frank Sanchez. And obviously he lost his last fight to Joe Joyce. It shows the level there of what Christian Hammer is. A guy who has had, what we're talking, uh, 10 losses in his career, and 50% of the time when he loses, he gets knocked out. It kind of shows you the type of opponent that if Fury isn't fighting the very best, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but these are the guys that he goes for. So let's just go off Christian Hammer then. And if you look at then the likes of Tom Schwartz. Now, Tom Schwartz coming into this, they obviously always try to build these fighters up, and Tyson was bigging up his ranking. I remember at the time, I forget where he was ranked when he fought Tyson Fury, but I know that he was not somebody who I think people were begging for him to fight. But you know, Tyson does what Tyson does, and obviously didn't. Now Tom Schwartz, if I get his record up here, just a second, because you know, again, Tom Schwartz isn't exactly, you know, linked with these huge fights. To be honest with you, he's somebody who kind of has since fighting Tyson Fury hasn't really been all that much. Obviously, that was his only loss. But then you look at the guys who he's fighting here. Lost to Fury. Beat Radek Varak. And again, these next two guys, again, there isn't much of anything in here. He fought a guy, his last fight, Muhammad Ali Dormaz, who's won 32 times and lost 32 times. And got knocked out 27 times. So this is what I mean with Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury's career is a very, very strange one, because he rightfully did beat Klitschko. He also rightfully beat Deontay Wilder 3 times, not 2 times, because he won the first one as well, in my opinion. Everything Tyson Fury's done in his career thus far has just been strange to me. Now, let's not also forget the fact that he was supposedly retired and only wanted the big money. I know Derek Chisora has a name, but he's not a big money fight at all. Nobody wants this fight. This fight does not make any sense to put it in a stadium for. Frank Warren, I think, was saying that it's been selling quite good, but I really don't see in what world that this fight is ever a money fight, or I can't even see it selling out that well, to be honest. I might be wrong, but it's not really a fight that people want. People will come to see Tyson Fury, but who really realistically wants to see this a third time, let alone see it at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where football stadiums in general aren't really that great for boxing. Sometimes the seats are too far, you can't really see the ring properly. I don't really see the appeal at all, and especially with the money that these tickets cost, because boxing tickets in general aren't they ain't cheap, and never have been. And I think for a fight like this, it really doesn't make sense to me to have it in an arena like this. If you look at, for example, if I go on the tickets right here, continue, it's £140 for 2 tickets, and that is just one. Obviously, they differ depending on where it is, I guess. You got some £162, some 180, some 192. It will be higher, but the highest that on the page I'm looking at is £300. And yet Tyson Fury chose to have a fight. If you're paying £300, Tyson Fury is going to be fine, and Deontay Wilder again. I think people would rather watch that for £300 than watch Derek Chisora. You want to fight Anthony Joshua, Usyk, just somebody who's a name and who's going to be an elite fighter. Now, I know there's a lot of different things about the whole Anthony Joshua situation. It looked like it was going to happen, then it didn't happen. To me, it almost looks to me from an outside point of view that Joshua wanted it. He really did want it, and Fury kind of was marching to the beat of his own drum and almost dictating things the way he wanted it to be. But then they were willing to still make the fight, and then I think maybe he had a talk with someone. It seems as if they almost cooled their interest in that fight. Not saying Joshua was ducking. I often said I don't like the word ducking in boxing. To me, fighters aren't afraid to fight over fighters. They're in the wrong sport if they are, and especially a guy like Anthony Joshua, who's an Olympic gold medalist and a former 2-time world champion. It doesn't make sense to me. So, same thing with the Errol Spence and Terence Crawford situation. Nobody ducks anybody. It's just politics can get in the way. And in the sense of Anthony Joshua, he seems to be someone who listens a lot to his advisors and people around him, and maybe they told him that this wasn't the fight to take. And to be honest, I kind of agree with this. I'll get into Joshua in another video, to be honest with you, because his career is another one. But on Tyson Fury, I don't understand what he hopes to gain from this. To be honest, the fight, if it's a warm up fight, that itself doesn't make sense. That Dylan White fight was not that long ago, at all. If I recall, when was it? I want to say it was it June time or May time? It was something along them lines. I'm pretty sure. It was April. So 23rd of April. He's now fighting a year, just a little bit, more than a little bit, but a year and how many months afterwards. It isn't like a huge layoff at all, especially the way Fury fights. He fights once a year pretty much anyway. And, fighting the Wilder fight, he had obviously quite a long layoff for both. Not his fault because obviously of the pandemic. And in the meantime, trying to make the Anthony Joshua fight. So, yeah, to me, again, it's not really a big layoff for Fury at all, especially when you consider a lot of the inactivity he's had over his career. You needed warm-up fights when you took 2 years off, and obviously had the issues. You don't need 2 years. I mean, you don't need a warm-up fight now. Doesn't make any sense. I just don't know why this fight is happening. It makes literally no sense at all. From a contender's point of view, I have to check the rankings, but I know Chisora isn't ranked number one by any of these governing bodies. In terms of who you could have fought, there are so many more interesting fights out there. I know Joe Joyce just fought and he wouldn't be available, but you can wait a little bit. I know it would have been a year then pretty much since you competed, but, I'm pretty sure you could, wait, actually, something just hit me. The Dylan White fight wasn't even last year, it was actually this year. And for some reason I had it in my head. That makes even less sense, actually. I'm saying a year and so many months. I've almost completely forgot that this fight, it felt like so long ago, that fight. That fight was this year, in April. So you've not even had a year off. Why not wait until January, February, and wait until someone like Joe Joyce is ready? Because that would be a fight people are interested in. People would be interested in him and Anthony Joshua. But again, sometimes it's not always about the mega fights. Sometimes it's about the fights that are just interesting stylistically. I look at someone like Errol Spence, and I always talk about, this is one thing I love about Spence. He never takes tune-ups or warm-ups. He had a car crash, almost died. His first fight back, he fought Danny Garcia. He then had an eye injury, his orbital, I think it was, and he had, it was something like that. And he then had so long off. He came back from a surgery. Who did he fight? Your Dennis Ugas. After the Garcia's fight, he was supposed to fight Pacquiao, but obviously got injured with the eye injury. So, and now he's obviously, the fight they were looking at was Terence Crawford. May happen, may not happen. We don't know. Obviously, Crawford's fighting Avanesyan, but it's a little bit like there's some fighters, they kind of play their cards in their own way. Like Floyd was a little bit like this, where he would just pick fights that wouldn't really make any sense, but he'd just take them. But Floyd, I understand, he's more about the money. He's Money Mayweather. I don't understand this from Fury at all from a career point of view. He was supposed to be retired. Now he's come out of retirement, and now he's fighting Derek Chisora again, the fight nobody wanted. It makes no sense, this fight, to me. I don't understand it. And pay-per-view wise, I'd be shocked if this does any decent numbers. I can't see people. Alright, people will pay for this, obviously. Not everybody's going to be on the same point of view. Some people might just think they may as well, if there's nothing on the weekend, they can watch Fury Chisora, but there's nothing to this fight. Like I said, there's no stakes. Everybody knows what happened in the last two fights. Chisora's, well, in his day, was a dangerous threat, but again, Derek Chisora is a British level fighter. He was never a world level fighter. And that's not to say he's a bad fighter at all. I think if you put Chisora in prime against like Deontay Wilder, I think it causes him problems. The heavyweight division is a division that's, I don't think you need to be a particularly elite level to beat some of these guys. I do think that at welterweight, I do think that at middleweight, super middleweight, all these other weights, but I think heavyweight's different. Heavyweight, the skill gap or the level of skill is not as high as it is from the lower weight classes. And yeah, and Chisora as well, at 38 years old, so he's not even a young Derek Chisora. He's 2 years off 40, and I don't really understand this one at all from Tyson Fury. But Tyson Fury does what he does, and I think some people lap it up and they love it, and they obviously buy into his whole sort of narrative that he likes to always build about how Anthony Joshua was afraid to fight him and how this guy was afraid to fight him. But to me, this one just makes very, very little sense to me. Tyson Fury is a great fighter, don't get twisted. There are a lot of things I like about him, but when he does stuff like this, it gets very frustrating because as fans, you want to see great fights, you know. This sport of boxing especially has had a lot of issues with making these types of fights, the big fights. We never got to see Wilder Joshua. We never got to see Mayweather Pacquiao when it should have happened. We didn't get to, currently we haven't seen Spencer Crawford. I know there's a lot of things. Maybe that might happen. Who knows? You know, there's just so many fights out there that you can look and list, and Joshua Fury can also put in that category. So, to me, it gets frustrating, and I think, again, I don't understand this. I think this will be a pay-per-view flop, to be honest. Again, I'm not an expert on this. Maybe I'm wrong about the pay-per-view numbers, but I just don't see what the appeal would be to pay all that money to watch it live and to watch it from your home. It just doesn't make sense to me. But we'll see how this one does. Obviously, like I said, for Tyson Fury, I just wonder where the whole narrative of his career is interesting. He either fights very good fighters or he fights guys who are just nowhere near his level. He never seems to fight them in between fighters. You know, not every fight needs to be a Joshua or a Wilder or a Usyk, but it also doesn't need to be a Tom Schwartz or a Otto Wallin or a Christian Hammer, and in this case, it doesn't need to be Derek Chisora. You know, people will lose interest in this very quickly, and I think people are starting to lose patience. I don't think anybody realistically at all wants this fight. I've not seen one person who's really excited for this, even for Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora's point of view, this fight is good for him financially. It makes him a lot of money, and I think that's pretty much it. That's what Chisora is, and he's always said that's the one thing that, you know, he's smart. He doesn't play for a fool, and financially, if he gets the money, I don't see issue from his side. I don't think people have an issue with him, but you know what? I just again, sometimes you do wonder in boxing. You know, there are some fighters who they kind of play the system, and they know that they will get the same amount of money, you know, fighting guys who are a lot lower than the elite level guys, and that's why they never will do it, because there's a risk there. I'm not saying Fury is one of those guys, but it just sometimes just feel like that with Fury, that he'll take the risk, but almost when he's ready and he wants to, you know. Like against Klitschko, for example. Don't get me wrong, I know he had issues in like way before and obviously during that, but he had the rematch booked with Klitschko and it didn't happen, and I felt very frustrated for Klitschko. And then you look at the whole thing with Wilder. He drew the first time when they were supposed to fight again, but he decided that he wanted to be a bit more smart, a bit business savvy, and then wait a little bit. He waited, fought him again. Then it was, oh, he's going to fight Joshua. He was telling people that's what was going to happen. And then what happened? The arbitration came in, and he then fought Wilder. And now it's just the same thing again. He talks all this, but then he fights Derek Chisora. I just don't understand the logic from Tyson Fury, but he does his own thing, and I think that's the one thing that makes him very unpredictable, is that you never know. Like, he will fight a Wilder, but then he'll fight a Tom Schwartz. It's just what he does. I don't think you can ever predict what he's gonna do. But you know, and I was convinced he was gonna fight Manuel Charr at one point. So it just shows you that again, he doesn't really. What I'm getting at here is he's often said that he doesn't care about the money. He cares about being a Spartan and being a warrior. But then why not fight guys who are just above this? He's above Derek Chisora on top. Let's not get to Derek Chisora, right, is a decent fighter and he's got the name behind him. But Derek Chisora is purely somebody, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, is like a gatekeeper. Derek Chisora, before beating Kubrat Pulev, lost his last 3, 2 to Parker and 1 to Usyk. That isn't, like, again, heavyweight champion, the best heavyweight in the world, they say. And these are the type of guys you're fighting. It does not make any sense. And if you want to compare, people talk about Tyson Fury maybe on the pound for pound list. He's nowhere near, in my opinion, because of exactly these things. And if you want to compare who people will look at to be some of the best pound for pound fighters in the world, look at Canelo Alvarez, beating Gennady Golovkin in his last fight. Lost to Dmitry Bivol, granted, Who did he fight before that? Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Yildirim, not a good one, but almost the same thing what Fury's almost done there. But then Callum Smith, Sergey Kovalev, Danny Jacobs, had the fight against Rocky Fielding, and then he fought Golovkin twice. Canelo, say what you want, he takes fights that you want to see. And then I even say about Bivol, he went and fought Dimitri Bivol, somebody who was dangerous as a light heavyweight, a younger man than him, and someone who's very, very good. Lost, but he still took the risk. He still took that fight. And to me, this is the issue with times with fighters who are in the position of Fury, where they are big stars. They almost don't want to take that risk. And if you look at, I go through a few here. I look at Errol Spence's record. Fought Yordenis Ugas' last fight. Fought Danny Garcia. Then he fought Sean Porter, Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia I know is a smaller man, but these are still. Porter was a WBC champ. Danny Garcia is dangerous. Ugas was the WBO. No, he wasn't. He was a WBA champ. This is what you want to see. And then, you could then go to his rival, you could call, of Alexander Usyk. So Usyk, his last fight, obviously we know, beat Anthony Joshua, and then beat him before that. He beat Derek Chisora and Chaz Witherspoon. Now these fights, the Chisora and Witherspoon fights, were him just adjusting to the division. He then beat Tony Bellew, who was WBC champ in Manchester, where he knocked him out. Murat Gassiev, Bradis, Michael Hunter. Again, Hunter, Bradis, and Gassiev are very, very dangerous fighters for Usyk. But him being the guy he is, obviously he comes through all these fights. But these are the fights that you kind of want to see. Fury, not specifically those fights, but you want to see him in fights where he's going to be tested, where the guy isn't going to come for a paycheck and actually come to try and win. I even look at Devin Haney. You look at his last two fights against Kambosos, but then he fought Jojo Diaz, fought Linares, fought Gamboa. And Devin Haney's a bad example, probably, because he's 29. No, he's not 29. How old is he? 23. I don't know. I'm talking about 29. He's 23 years old, and look at already the names on his resume. I mean, Linares and Kambosos, two former world champions, and then you got Jojo Diaz up in the, who again, even though he didn't do enough in the fight, Diaz, he still came to fight, and I think that's just what you need. I think with Fury, you need someone who's going to come in there and fight, and I think you could have had against, again, Joe Joyce, you could have had Michael Hunter. It's a bad one. Even Luis Ortiz would have been, I think, a more interesting fight than this. Just someone who you haven't beat before, someone who gauges a bit of interest, but he didn't do that. He chose to fight Derek Chisora for the third time after beating him with ease twice at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Makes literally no sense to me. From a fight point of view, from a business point of view, I think this fight will flop. I don't think people at all are behind this fight. Everybody seems to have outwardly been against this fight. And yeah, not a good state of affairs, to be honest, but we'll see how happens in the fight. I'll do a preview and a review for the fight, even though I don't want to, but I will do it. And yeah, just my thoughts on this whole debacle between Tyson Fury and his weird career. Fights good guys, but also fights guys who just nowhere near. Doesn't make any sense, but it is what it is. And yeah, just my thoughts on the announcement of Derek Chisora and Tyson Fury free at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in December. And yeah, until next time.